There we go.
So, hi everyone. I am Aileen. I'm one of the nurses here at the Irish Heart Foundation, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm delighted you could join us. Today the talk is called Supporting Stroke Rehabilitation and Independence via Technology. And Anne Conley from Acquired Brain Injury Ireland is going to facilitate the talk for us today. Anne is a project manager and senior occupational therapist. She works as part of the CREATE service in Acquired Brain Injury Ireland, which is a digital assistive technology service. Anne has many years' experience. She qualified or graduated as an occupational therapist in 2010. She worked in acute and rehabilitation services for people with stroke. And now, working at Acquired Brain Injury Ireland, she leads the digital assistive technology service. The overarching purpose of the service that she leads is to harness the power of digital tools so that people after their stroke event or brain injury can maintain their independence, they can communicate, and they can control their environment and many more things. I've heard Anne speaking before and I found just so inspiring, and I was straight on there trying to figure out stuff myself. So I'm looking forward to today's talk. I'm going to pass you over to Anne. If during the talk you have any questions, absolutely pop your questions in the Q&A function. You'll find that down the bottom of your screen. So it's called Q&A. If you pop your questions in there rather than in the chat, that would be easier for me. And then at the end, when we stop the recording, we'll go through all of your questions and answers. Anne thinks that the presentation itself will take about 35 to 40 minutes. So we're going to have loads of times for discussion and questions at the end. So I'll pass you over to Anne now. Anne, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Hi everybody, and thanks again, Aileen, for that introduction, and thanks so much for asking me to come here today. I suppose the content of the talk that I'm hoping to deliver today is around supporting rehabilitation and independence using technology. And I think what I've tried to do is look at what technology you might already have around you anyway, so that you're not going out buying something new. So this is how can you optimize what you have already to support your own independence. So as Aileen mentioned, I work for Acquired Brain Injury Ireland. So before I get into the content of the talk, I'm just going to pop up, just going to pop up a little bit of information about the services that Acquired Brain Injury Ireland deliver. So you'll see there's quite a few different services that ABI deliver across the country. So there's different services in every area. I just thought it would be good for people who are on this call today who may be in an area where they could get a service from ABI and maybe they weren't aware of it. So you can get a referral via any healthcare professional into the organisation. And I think some of the ones that are quite interesting, particularly around, would say, family services, so support for the people you live with or that support you, case management, home and community rehabilitation, and clubhouses where you can meet other people who are recovering from acquired brain injuries such as stroke. So technology. If any of you have a smartphone in your pocket, and I can see lots of people are logged onto the call today using a smartphone, you have more technology in your pocket or in your hand than took the first people to the moon, okay? So surely we can get that technology working a little bit better for us, okay? There is so much available now and so much available in our houses that even going back 10 years ago, you'd have had to have gotten a specialist device or an extra device to do the things that we can now do with a phone or with the smart speaker in our house. Now, what I will say is I have put quite a lot of content in the presentation today. I'm going to be talking about quite a lot of things, but that's because I know Aileen and her team, they're going to record this. So it will be there as a resource. So some of it won't be relevant to everybody. It may just spark a little bit of curiosity or a bit of an interest today. And maybe in a month or two's time, you'll think, oh, actually something popped up at that technology talk. I might go back and have a look at it. So I appreciate that not everyone might be able to stay on track or stay focused for all of this. But at least you know it's there for you if you need to come back to it again. So the areas that I'm going to focus on today is the first one is around keeping your phone accessible. Now that will be looking at smartphones, so keeping them accessible for you. We're going to look a little bit at digital communication tools. We're going to look at tools that are available to help if you've got a visual difficulty or you have difficulty reading. And then we're also going to look at Alexa, or maybe you might have a Google Nest, I think they're called, or a Google Assistant, or you might have a different type of smart speaker, but they all do very similar things. So we're going to look at that as well and see how might we use that to help memory and planning. Okay, so what do I mean by phone accessibility? So accessibility features are available on all our phones, and you might never have had to think about looking at them or never have looked at them before. And really what they are is little modifications that you can make to your phone so that they're usable by everybody. So as we know, if someone experiences a stroke, they can be affected in many different ways, and no two strokes are exactly the same. So for some people, they may be having a little bit of difficulty typing or holding a phone. Other people might be having difficulty reading what's on the screen or understanding the phone or getting around in it. Some people may have difficulty hearing it. Some people may have difficulties with all of these. So I want to just give you a whistle-stop tour of what accessibility features might be in your phone that'll mean you can keep using it, or you might be able to use it a little bit easier. And when we talk about smartphones, one of the things is they're generally one of two types, okay? And what we call these are operating systems. So you might be an Android phone, which they tend to be the Samsung phones or the Huawei phones, if I can pronounce that right. Or you might have an Apple phone. And they're just two slightly different ways of operating. So sometimes something will be available on Android that's not available on an Apple. And I've just tried to keep that clear as we're going along in the presentation. But as a general rule, if Android come up with something brilliant this week for accessibility, Apple are going to follow it pretty quickly afterwards and vice versa. Okay, so in phone accessibility, I'm going to give you some practical tips and tricks around what you can do if you have low vision after a stroke. So low vision after a stroke might mean that things are a little bit blurrier for you. You might have difficulty differentiating something in the foreground from the background. You may need to get your prescription checked. Patches of your field of vision might be gone as well, which might make it a little bit difficult for you. So some hints and tips around that. For some people, stroke can cause difficulty reading, where they wouldn't have had difficulty reading before. And that can cause trouble when you're looking at a smartphone screen. A lot of it is around trying to read information and knowing where to tap and where to go. If you have some physical difficulties, particularly in your upper limbs, maybe you're going to have difficulty typing. So you might have a large phone and you can't hold it with one hand and type with the other. So we're going to look at practical ways to get around that too. For some people, the phone can feel a little bit overwhelming after a stroke, trying to figure out what each of the buttons do. You have loads of apps on the screen. How do you get around that in a little bit more ease? So I'm going to mention one thing in particular in relation to that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you loads of things today, and that's great. But what you should really do is after this talk, pull out your phone and just go into the little cogwheel app, so the settings app, and go down to accessibility and just see what's there available to you. So you'll see here on the left, the Android has a little purple logo down the bottom there, and it's called accessibility. And Apple have a similar one. It's kind of a universal symbol for accessibility. So it's a little blue one down the bottom. Okay. So for low vision, you can go into the settings here. This one shows an Apple, and there's a few different things you can do. So you can add large text, and that actually goes up really, really high. So you can increase the size of all of the text on the phone in all of your apps, in all of your message, and in everything. You can also select bold text, which will just make the outline of the text that bit thicker. You can reduce transparency. So that one's kind of harder to explain, but if you look at the side there, you'll see the little toggle switches are kind of a lighter grey on top of a darker grey. There's very little, they seem to kind of fade into each other. And the same with increasing colour contrast. It'll just help with that as well, that things will look quite different from each other. So I have a little screenshot here of where I've added all of those features onto the phone, and you can just see it's that bit loud, that bit bigger, that bit easier to navigate. Things have definite kind of boundaries, and they're easier to see. So like that might help lots of people, not just people who might be having new difficulty with low vision, but it is just easier to navigate. Then if we think about whether you might have difficulty reading, or with cognitive fatigue, you might just be tired of reading through long messages, or people are meaning well, but you're getting lots of WhatsApp, lots of text, and you might just be tired of reading, or you might actually struggle with reading. For Android users, now when I say this trigger word, some of your phones might light up, but anyway, for Android users, if you say, "Hey Google, read my message," it'll actually go in and read the last text message that you received. Or you can say, "Hey Google, read my WhatsApp," and it'll read it out loud for you. If you want to look at anything else on your phone that you want a screen reader for, there's a talk back feature on your Android phone when you go into the accessibility features. And once you have that enabled, that will actually read out anything that's on the screen of your phone to you. And it's very similar with Apple as well. So the trigger word there is, "Hey Siri, read my message," or "read my last WhatsApp." Sorry, my phone is going off here beside me. Or they have another screen reader feature as well, where you can actually just highlight what you want read out to you. And that's available through the accessibility features as well. And that's called Speak Selection or Speak Screen. Like if you went back 10, 15 years ago, getting a screen reader meant buying an expensive piece of software that you would upload onto a PC. So to think that we have that now just so freely available in our own phones, it's fantastic. So anything you need to read, emails, WhatsApp messages, text messages, whatever it is, you can get your phone to read that aloud to you, which again, as I mentioned, is helpful if you're having trouble reading, but also if you're just fatigued or you don't want to be straining your eyes while reading again. The other thing that's really helpful, so you probably are familiar, or a lot of people would be familiar with voice notes, but there's also an option to dictate your text messages or dictate your emails through your phone. And that means that there's inbuilt what they call speech to text software. So if you look at that keyboard, what you'll often find anywhere where a keyboard pops up, there's this little microphone button down the bottom. And what that allows you to do is you can click on that and speak, at a slow enough pace so that it can hear you, and it'll dictate what you want to type. So if you're having trouble maybe holding the phone and typing with the hand, or maybe you're right-handed and all of a sudden you've had a stroke and your right hand isn't working as well as it used to, you can now use this dictate function instead of typing. So that can be really helpful for a lot of people. And again, it might just be a fatigue thing. You might just want to get this message done that bit quicker. And then around easy navigation as well. So for the people who have an Android phone, so maybe you've got a Samsung or one of those types of phones, there is an app that you can download called Google Action Blocks. And you'll see a little picture there of it on the left, what it looks like. This might also be helpful for maybe older people who are using a smartphone for the first time, or they're just having trouble getting around it. You just want to simplify it. You can add a few little boxes. If you have a techie person at home, it'll help and they can help you with this. That will do a few things. So you'll see there it has a button to call Kennedy. It has a button to play their favorite music, or a button to set the morning alarm. So you can just reduce it down to the things that you use your phone for. As we know, there's millions of apps to choose from, but really we all use our phone for a few things. It might be that you go on Facebook or Instagram, you make a few calls and you WhatsApp a few people. I've chosen to start off the presentation today by looking at phone accessibility, because I think when you're recovering from an acute stroke, or you're partially through your rehabilitation, maintaining connection and maintaining relationships and keeping communication open is really important. And it's a really important part of your recovery as well. What I have seen before in practice is that people, maybe they lose a little bit of function in their hand, or they just find their phone hard to use. And they might go back a few steps and get back the old 9-button phone that they had 10 years ago, the old reliable Nokias. But really, there's so much that can be done with the smartphone you have. And you can still do things then, like logging onto Zoom calls here with the Irish Heart Foundation. You can log into Facebook to talk to your friends or be part of the support group. It's really worth looking at how you can maintain that, even if it's just that it gets you back into the habit of trying to pick up the phone, maybe trying to type, maybe trying to use a hand that you're trying really hard to work on in rehabilitation. So I suppose that's why I wanted to start off by looking at the phone accessibility, because there's so much there that you can do, and it is so important to keep it going. Okay, so I'm going to move now to communication aids. Some people might be familiar with communication aids. As we know, for some people after a stroke, their language can be affected, and speaking and understanding language might be a little bit more difficult. And digital communication aids are often referred to as AAC, so augmentative and alternative communication aids. And again, these types of devices, they're just so much more accessible than they ever used to be. So going back 10, 15 years ago, these would have had to have been on a designated device. The software and the hardware would have been very clunky. They'd been much more specialist. You may have had to go through a specialist service to even hear about them or learn about them. Now, what I would say is, with a word of caution, is that I suppose supporting language skills after a stroke is quite complex. And it is a really good idea, before you would go and invest heavily in something like a communication aid or supporting a loved one to get a communication aid, that you would link with a speech and language therapist who knows your unique communication skills before you invest in something that is expensive. But what I would say is that now we're quite lucky in that there are a lot of communication aids that are out there that can help an awful lot of people, that are quite cheap. So they're not much of a heavy investment. And if they work for you, wouldn't that be brilliant? And if you could continue to communicate with family, friends, or loved ones through the use of one of these aids, that would be fantastic. So there's one that I'm going to signpost you to, because I think it's just a really helpful one and a really handy one, and it's called Speech Assistant. So Speech Assistant is an app that's available through the Google Play Store for your Android phones or for your Android tablets, or through the App Store on Apple. And you'll see there are just two little pictures of them. It'll allow you to type what you want to say, or you can use symbols as well. So for people who are struggling to communicate their wants and needs, it's quite a low cost way to maybe see if something like this might work for them. But again, it is quite a complex area of rehabilitation, and I would seek to talk to a speech and language therapist who would know the person really well. It's very customizable. You can add the symbols that you need or your loved one needs, or you can save phrases that they need to say a lot of the time. And I would say as well is, sometimes people think you only can benefit from these devices if you have absolutely no speech at all. But I've seen it work really nicely for people who just have difficulty finding words. And it gives them a little prompt, particularly if you use the symbol side of it, that they might be able to say, oh, I'm thinking of water. That's the word I'm looking for. Or they can just support their communication that little bit more. So as I said, it is very low cost. I think on Apple, it's €22. And on Android, it's about €9. So it's not a massive investment for something that could have a big impact. And even for therapists working in acute settings, if you have somebody with a new language problem, it could be something that you could have on your phone to very easily communicate with someone in the early days as well. If you're interested in communication aids that are available to download from app stores, Call Scotland is a really good resource that you can go and see all the different types of communication aids. So like, you can see that wheel there on the left. that has loads and loads of different types of communication aids. And that's really where your SLT comes in, because they will understand the features of these and your unique needs as well. But that's a really good place to go to if you're looking for more information. And again, the free app or the cheap app that I'm just after mentioning there is a good one if you need to try something out and just want to practice. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is vision and reading. Okay, so I'm sure you're probably tired of listening to me babble on. So I have a quick video here. So there is a really lovely app that's freely available for your Apple phone that really supports people who have had vision difficulties after stroke or perceptual difficulties after stroke. And what I mean by perception is that maybe you're having a little bit of difficulty recognizing colors, or you might have difficulty recognizing and using objects. You may just have difficulty recognizing people, and that can happen quite a lot. And some people as well will have difficulty reading. So what do you do if a letter comes in the post and it's an appointment and there's no one there to read it out for you? Or maybe it's something that's quite private and you'd prefer not to have to get someone else to read it for you. Or you might just want to read the label at the side of your medication. This is a lovely app for all of those things. Now I'm going to press play and I'm going to cross my fingers that it works out. I did test it beforehand, but I hope that you can hear it and you can just see what this app has to offer for you. And as I said, it is a free app.
Seeing AI is a Microsoft research project for people with visual impairments. The app narrates the world around you by turning the visual world into an audible experience. Point your phone's camera, select a channel, and hear a description. The app recognizes saved friends.
Jenny near top right, 3 feet away.
Describes the people around you, including their emotions.
28-year-old female wearing glasses looking happy.
It reads text out loud as it comes into view, like on an envelope.
Ken Lawrence, P.O. Box.
Or a room entrance.
Conference 2005.
Or scan and read documents like books and letters. The app will guide you and recognize the text with its formatting.
Top and left edge is not visible. Hold steady. Lease agreement. This agreement
When paying with cash, the app identifies currency bills.
$20.
When looking for something in your pantry or at the store, use the barcode scanner with audio cues to help you find what you want.
Campbell's tomato soup.
When available, hear additional product details.
Heated microwave bowl on high.
And even hear descriptions of images in other apps like Twitter by importing them into Seeing AI.
A close-up of Bill Gates.
Finally, explore our experimental features like scene descriptions to get a glimpse of the future.
I think it's a young girl throwing a frisbee in the park.
Experience the world around you with the Seeing AI app from Microsoft.
That's an app that I have recommended for a lot of people who've come through our service. And it's particularly useful, I feel, around reading out letters for you or reading the side of your medication, recognizing currency. These tend to be the things that are coming up for a lot of the people that we're working with. Let me just move on. So for people who don't have an Apple phone, there is another app very similar on Android phones called Lookout Assistant. It doesn't do everything, but it does a lot of similar things. And most of these apps now are inbuilding a feature where they'll actually read handwriting for you as well. And what I would say is, if you're somebody who has been affected, their vision has been affected after a stroke, you can always link with your local National Council for the Blind. So what I've experienced in the past is that people think you need to have full sight loss to be able to access these services. But even if you just have a change in vision or a change in your visual field, NCBI can be really helpful, and they have assistive technology staff there as well who will be able to talk you through some of these apps, and they can also talk you through everyday living aids as well. And they're nationwide service, so if you feel like you could benefit from them, they accept self-referral. Okay, so I've moved on now to the last section of the presentation, and some people might recognize this. So this is an Alexa. It's a smart speaker. So I don't know if many people who are attending today have one of these, or you might have a Google Nest, or you might have an Apple HomePod. But I was just saying to Aileen and Katie before we started, you could do a month series of information on what an Alexa can do for you. They're really valuable pieces or really valuable devices. But I think most of us who have them probably just use them to listen to the radio. I know that's certainly what we do a lot, or listen to music. But there is so much that we can do with an Alexa to support memory and planning in particular. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. So what some people will say as well is that, if your voice quality or the way your voice sounds or your ability to speak quickly has been impacted by your stroke, that you can't really use your Alexa anymore, that it's not picking up on what you say, or it's not giving you enough time. So one of the things that we recommend quite a lot is turning on adaptive listening. So adaptive listening is available via the Alexa app. So if you have an Alexa in your house, somebody in the house or you might have the Alexa app on the phone. And all you need to do is go into that. And again, you're looking at settings, and they actually have some accessibility features there as well. And one of them is adaptive listening mode. And what that will do is it'll give you extra time to give your prompt to Alexa. So you're not trying to get something out really quickly. There's also another feature that you can do, which is adding or getting Alexa to remember your voice in particular, so that it becomes aware of maybe if your voice gets a little bit slurred, maybe when you're fatigued or towards the end of the day, that she kind of gets used to that and she knows what you in particular are saying. So that's adaptive listening, and it's also developing your own unique profile on Alexa as well. So one of the things that we find really useful, and we work with some of our clients with, is connecting a calendar to their Alexa. Now, I suppose that does mean that you need to input your information into the calendar, but maybe you could do that either yourself or maybe with the support of your family. Things like putting in upcoming birthdays, appointments, and particularly, after having stroke and in the early and medium days after having a stroke and in your rehabilitation, you may have quite a lot of new appointments. You might be going to physio, you might be going to speech therapy, you might be going back to the hospital to see your consultant or your medical team. And all of them can really add a lot of new information and a lot of planning and organising that maybe you didn't have to do before, even if you're back at work and you're trying to figure out all of these things as well. So one of the things that you can do is through the Alexa app is connect your calendar to your Alexa account. And once that is done, you can then ask Alexa, or you can program her to tell you what's coming up on any given day. So you could say, so some people in the mornings will have a feature where they will ask Alexa, Alexa, what's on my calendar for the day? And they will talk you through what's coming up for you. You could ask what's happening this week, and they can talk you through it as well. And that can be really helpful. Now, with any of these things, I suppose there's an element of skill building and habit building as well. So for this to work well, there is a little bit of work involved in, getting used to putting everything in that diary. But often if you're having difficulty with planning and memory, that's the type of work that you have to, or that you will be working on, is getting consistent with strategies and skills to support the memory and the planning. And Alexa can be another tool in your toolbox to do that. You can also ask Alexa, we'll say if you're in the kitchen and you're doing cooking, you can really quickly ask for a reminder. So Alexa, set an alarm for 15 minutes, and an alarm will go off to remind you to come back to the pot or come back to the oven or do what you're doing. And that can just be really, I suppose, give you a little bit of peace of mind as well, that you might not forget what's on the stove or forget that your dinner is cooking. And another one that I find really helpful is the shopping list feature. So if you have your Alexa app, within that app, there is lists, and within that, there is shopping lists. So what you can do is anytime you notice, we'll say throughout the week, before you do your big shop, you can say, hey, Alexa, add milk to the shopping list, add soap to the shopping list, add whatever it is, so that you're not trying to carry that around. And for people who might be experiencing fatigue, particularly cognitive fatigue, anything that you can offload from your brain, that your brain doesn't have to work to remember, is really helpful. So if you're able to plan your shopping list throughout the week as things occur to you, and you can just say, hey, Alexa, add oranges to my shopping list, it saves you having to, I suppose, try and remember it. And it's all there for you then when you go into your app, your shopping list is completely built. If you think that things like Alexa might be helpful for you and you don't currently have one, they're actually becoming much cheaper. So you do need to have good internet in the house. But if you already have that, you can get some Alexas. I bought some recently for our program. They're only €15 and they look like a plug, and you just plug them into the wall and they do everything that Alexa will do. Or you can wait until, say, Black Friday or Amazon Prime Day, and you can get them really low cost. So you can get them for about 25, €30, the kind of smaller run-of-the-mill ones. So there's plenty of opportunities there. There's so much that Alexa or any smart speaker can do for you, and it's just about figuring out kind of what's the best thing. If you think that that would be helpful for you, across Ireland, we have memory technology resource rooms, and they are run by occupational therapists for people who have any degree of memory difficulty. And they have a range of technology within them. So if you have memory trouble since you've had your stroke and you think that you could benefit from looking at technology in more detail, this could be a good resource for you. And they will accept, as far as I know, they accept self-referrals. And if not, you could probably get your GP to do that referral for you. And some of them even have loan libraries where you can borrow things from them and try them out for a little while before you commit to paying for them. So that's everything from my talk today. If you have any questions, I'm sure Aileen will take over from here.
Okay, just before we pop into the questions, we will stop the recording. So Katie, if I can ask you to organise that for us, and then we'll start into the questions. Thank you so much, Anne.
No problem.